关于那个大麻合法化之后，我们的对于经济来讲，应该知道些什么东西呢？那你香港来讲，合同应该怎么样进行更改呢？还有对于租约方面会有什么影响？这些我们都会提到。
OK。
对然后我们公司的介绍呢，我就留给David。
Waving to her.
OK。
大家今天的 material 呢，我有那个 PDF portion， 就是 PPT ready。所以呢，如果大家想就是收到我的这个，就是我们这个准备的这个 material 呢，也可以加我微信，然后我发给你们。我的微信你可以扫。这样吧，然后大家传一下，你们可以，我的 WeChat 微码就在那个卡片上，你们可以扫，然后加我，就是要这个 request for the material， 然后我就可以发给大家好了。然后那个如果没有加的或者没有微信或者怎么样，我也会发给那个 Sam 可以通过 email 形式，比如说发给大家也可以。
Okay. I'll do that. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. I know you guys all have very busy lives and lots to do, and but it's nice to see a good crowd like this out, and we're very excited to be here. It's the first time that Nicole and I, or anybody from our office, had a chance to be at this office to do a seminar. So we hope it's the first of many. So, but we've got to start somewhere. And this is a very good, interesting topic. It's something a little bit different, and I hope you find it interesting. And I encourage you to look at it from two different points of view. One, you can look at this topic from your own personal point of view. How is this new law of cannabis going to affect me as someone living in Canada? How is it going to affect my family? How is it going to affect my friends? Because it affects all of us to some degree just in our daily lives. So hopefully some of the information we give you today is just going to help you along just thinking of it in those terms. But we're also going to discuss the way this law affects you as a real estate agent and how it affects the real estate industry as well. So you can look at it from two different points of view. So before we get going into the meat and potato of it, I just put this up to show you what I used to look like.
Still the same.
Still the same, yeah.
Still the same. I was 12 years old when this picture. But I just want to tell you a little bit about our office. It's our first time here. I've been practicing law myself for 33 years now. Our firm's been around for over 40 years, almost 45 years. Because a cousin of mine, Jerry Korman, started a firm out there 33 years ago. I started working downtown at a Bay Street firm doing mostly commercial real estate at the time, but he's always done a lot of residential. And then I joined up with him about 17, 18 years ago. And we've been in our Mississauga office, which is our head office out there. And just a little over a year ago, we opened up another office in Markham on Woodbine around 407 and Woodbine. So we're doing more and more in the East End, and it was just time for us to have more of a presence. We were always running around to sign clients and everything in the East End of the city, so we opened up there. So Nicole, Nicole's one of our senior most law clerks, and she spends time going back and forth between the offices. She's spending more and more time at the Markham office. We have two clerks there. I try and spend a day and a half there. Some of the other lawyers are running back and forth. And we're probably going to be expanding that office in the near future as well. And might be relocating, but in the same general area. We've also got an office under construction right now at Bathurst and Lawrence area that we hope will be getting up in the spring. So we want to have a little more of a presence in the middle of the city to sign clients. But basically, wherever our clients are, we'll find a way to meet them and to sign. So I used to think, we used to talk about wherever there was a Tim Hortons was one of our satellite offices in the city. We'd meet someone anywhere. So what we do primarily, well, before we get to the agenda, just tell you a little more about firm. We are a real estate firm. Okay, that's our bread and butter. We're a real estate boutique firm. We now have 6 lawyers in the firm. I have 2 other partners. There's 3 partners, 3 associates, and we all do real estate. So I put us against, a larger firm's real estate department, because we're pretty good at, we think, at what we do. We have a staff of over 20, and we've got like fabulous law clerks, some very senior law clerks, like Nicole. We've got some others just like her that really do a fabulous job. Very supportive to you as agents, very supportive to the clients. And when we value our relationships, part of the reason we built up our firm is a lot of it is based on our relationships with the agents. Because we want you to be able to get in touch with us, with a lawyer or a clerk, when you need to, when you're in the middle of a deal. Not at the end of the deal after things are a problem. We can always help you out afterwards. But while you're negotiating a deal, if something comes up and you need some help with a clause, or can I accept this wording, can I not accept this wording, and you can't get a hold of your broker or Sam or something like that, we're available too, so you contact us. And we've always made ourselves available, and if you can't get me, you get one of my partners, and we share stuff. You can't get a partner, you get one of the associates. Someone will be able to answer your question. We do a lot of pooling in our office. I think that's one of the strengths. When you hire one of us lawyers, you're getting all 6 of us. And if someone's away, or someone's in a meeting, or someone's busy, someone else will pick it up. We're not protective of our files. We want to make sure the job gets done. So that's a little bit of my commercial presentation for today. I want to get on with our agenda. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Little agendas, just so you can see where we're going with this. We're going to talk about the purpose of the Act, and a little bit about cannabis itself, and why people use it, and where they get it, where it's growing. We're going to talk a little bit about the clauses that should be in agreement, purchase, and sale that you might be used to, or then that we might want to change a little bit about the cannabis and grow-up clauses. We're going to talk about a stigma and a defect, and why that's really sort of the central issue as a realtor that you've got to be aware of. And then what everybody wants to know is, where can I buy cannabis, and where can I smoke it, and can you travel with it? And then we'll talk a little about the commercial side of things. If you have clients that want to get into the commercial side of it, to either grow it or distribute it or to retail it, we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then how it affects residential tenancies and the rights of tenants in residential type of properties. And a little bit about commercial retail as well at the end. So we've got a fair bit on the agenda. So we're going to start with this. The key date for all this was October 17, 2018. That's when the law came in. And this was a law from the federal government. This was Trudeau's Liberal government deciding to impose this or bring this in to cover all of Canada, which is very unique. It's only the second country in the world to legalize marijuana, okay, or cannabis. There's other, like in the U.S., I think there's 9 states or a dozen states or something that now have it legal. Some others are moving towards it, but it's not on a national level there. But in Canada, it's a federal law. So they enacted this system for legalization, and includes, they basically had a choice. Do you want to decriminalize it, which a lot of people are sort of in favor of? Because a lot of people have criminal records just because they possessed a little bit of marijuana for their own personal use, but it was illegal. So one step would be just to decriminalize it, but the government went further than that. They're actually making it legal to be able to grow it, to be able to sell, to be able to market it, to be able to have for your personal use. Now what they do is the federal government, they impose the law on the country, but then they pass on some of the responsibility for the implementation of the law to the provincial government. So the provincial government in Ontario has to pass a cannabis law itself, which they did. So why do they do this? They want to have some control. The danger is with the youth. Okay, how accessible is it going to be, and what type of quality and everything. So they have to, if they're going to bring in this law to make it legal, they've got to put a lot of controls in it, which they did. So they want to restrict the youth's ability to access it. They want to impose criminal offenses on people that are misusing it. They have to establish some policies as part of this. One of the main goals was to reduce the burden on the criminal justice system. So you don't have the system bogged down like it's been just because someone was caught possessing marijuana, even if it's for their own personal use. So that's no longer a criminal offense as long as they don't have more than the limited amount that they're allowed to have. So that's going to take a lot of the burden off the criminal justice system. And they want to provide certain ways to produce it, allow adults to possess it without feeling like they've broken the law. So these are some of the purposes. So what is cannabis? Some people aren't even familiar with the word cannabis, might be more familiar with the term marijuana or pot or something like that. Cannabis is the actual plant. Okay, so that's why the term cannabis has become more and more popular, and it's part of the act as opposed to marijuana. Cannabis is the real part of the act, and what I've learned from doing these seminars and putting together, there's an ingredient in cannabis called the THC, and that's the part that gives you the high when you smoke cannabis or smoke marijuana. There are certain products that can be made with cannabis that don't have that THC in it, and there's been a lot of medicinal benefits that's already been in place even before this law came in, from cannabis products without the THC, where you can still get certain benefits but not have the high that comes along with it. Most common way to use cannabis is through smoking or vaping, and the point on the bottom here, is this a pointer as well, Mike?
I think so.
Oh, there it is, okay. If you could read this, currently selling cannabis-infused foods and beverages are not legal, and the federal government plans to legalize these sometime in the next year. So right now, the way the law stands is really just smoking and vaping it, okay? But the rest is coming. There will be all kinds of products when they get the retail up and running that will be, food products that you can drink or you can ingest and everything, and they got to put a lot of controls on that as well. So why do people want it? Why do they use it? There's a bunch of reasons. Some is just for the euphoria, the high. I always look at it, it's no different than alcohol. The other thing is the medicinal value, and there's already been medicinal products, and there will be a lot more. And some of the benefits that we've put out here for you that you can see of why they use it and how it helps, and these are some things it helps with: inflammation, pain, seizures, substance disorders, mental disorders. It's not addictive like some of the other painkillers, so this should help people get off certain things like opiates, where there's deaths and serious problems with it. It doesn't go that far, so it provides all these benefits without being as dangerous and as risky. So as time goes, now that it's legal, there's going to be a lot more studies. They'll keep carrying on, they'll find better uses for it as well. So here's the important thing that you have to know. Under the Federal Act, the legal age is 18 years old for someone to purchase cannabis. Okay? But then it gets thrown to the provinces. The legal age in Ontario is 19 years. So in the province of Ontario, you have to be 19 years old to purchase cannabis, okay, or to possess cannabis. And then there's some restrictions on that as well, which I'll get into. So an individual, any of us living in Canada, is allowed to buy up to 30 grams of recreational cannabis at one time for their own personal use. So you can buy it online, eventually you can buy it in a store with 30 grams. I don't have an example of what 30 grams is. I asked someone at a previous seminar, like I don't know what a bag of cannabis would be 30 grams. Is it like the size of this page? And most people said, I don't know. One guy says, oh, no, it's not that. He knew. So I said, okay, is it half a page? And he goes, no, not half a page. Quarter page. He goes, yeah, you're probably pretty close. So about a quarter page bag, something like this would probably be a 30-gram bag of cannabis. Okay? So you're allowed to have that. And for your own person, you're allowed to buy it at any one time. Now you can go back the next day and buy it again. You can't buy more than 30 grams at one time. And you're allowed to have that on you. So you're allowed to have that. You can be walking down the street, you can go wherever you want, you can have your 30 grams on you. You can't smoke it everywhere. We're going to talk about where you can smoke it, but you can have it on you. Okay? Yes?
They don't have a restriction for 1 month, you're allowed to buy one time, you can do it every day?
So far they don't.
Oh my goodness,
Okay.
that's terrible.
Well, but I think that the whole idea is people shouldn't have to, people that really want a lot of it, shouldn't have to feel the need to go and hoard it and accumulate a lot,
So
because it's
they
gonna be
don't
available
work
for
every
them.
day.
So as soon as they run out of their 30 grand, they could be, it's not hard, it's not going to be hard for them to get the next 30
Yeah.
grand, okay? Right now, as this is getting going, it is a little bit difficult because it's not set up yet, but we're only a month, 6 weeks into this process right now.
They're small.
Okay. So, what about growing your own personal cannabis? The new act allows a person over the age of 18 to grow their own, as long as it's not more than 4 plants in a dwelling house. Okay? So this is very important, and I'm not sure why they did this, because if they're gonna make it available everywhere and control what's gonna be grown and everything, why do you have to grow it yourself? But I guess you're buying the seeds, it'll be a less expensive process if you're growing it yourself, if you actually know how to grow it. And maybe it'll come with instructions and maybe it won't. But anyway, but you're allowed to, that's the important thing, you're allowed to grow up to 4 plants in a dwelling house. So that's not per person, that's a dwelling house. Okay, so a husband and wife living in a house together can only grow 4 plants. Can't grow 8 plants. It's just 4 plants in a dwelling house. It doesn't matter whether it's a condominium dwelling or it's a detached house or a townhouse. It's 4 plants in a house. Okay, that's the maximum.
So
Okay.
David, if
Yep.
my tenant downstairs in the basement starts to grow 4,
No.
they can't do it, right?
Not only unless you're growing 0 upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 in the house. So you may have to negotiate that. If you grow, you grow, I need 1, you can have 3, and next month you'll switch it or something, or, so. But Ontario, it's not 18, remember, okay, you gotta be 19 to be able to grow your 4 plants in your house, okay? So, if you've got, kids away at university and you got 4 19-year-olds sharing a house, they're still only allowed 4 plants in the house, it's not 16 plants, okay? So make sure they know that. Now, let's talk a little bit this one. In your typical agreement of purchase and sale that you've been using up to now, you probably had a clause like this, the grow-off clause, okay? Where the seller's representing and warranting that while the seller owned the property, he hasn't used the property for the growth or manufacture of any illegal substances. Okay, so he's saying, well, I owned it, I haven't done it. And to the best of the seller's knowledge and belief, the use of the property has never been used for the growth of illegal substances. So is that the one you've been using, something very similar to this? I imagine you would be, okay? So that's still a valid clause after October 17th, because you would want to know if you sign that today and a seller wrote that in there, that means that up until October 17, 2018, there was never any illegal substances or anything grown there. Now, from October 17th forward, they can be growing their 4 plants in the house, and they can still make this statement, because they haven't grown any illegal substances. Okay? Well, that's exactly what we have to think about now. Okay? Is this good enough?
No, not good enough.
Okay? It might be, but I know if I was buying a house, I would want to know, and we're only 6 weeks into it, but when we're a year into it, 2 years, 5 years into it, I think you might want to know whether or not anybody's ever grown cannabis in the house, but even the legal limit of cannabis, right? I think it's something you might want to know. So, this is just leading up to the next one, that clause doesn't cover the use of the growth of legal cannabis in a house, okay? So this is a suggestion that we're making now if you want to know that. It's actually the same clause, but all we're doing is saying that it's never been used for the growth or manufacture of any cannabis. And to the best of his knowledge and belief, there's never been the growth of any cannabis in the house.
If I use
Okay.
the word marijuana instead of cannabis, is okay.
Cannabis is probably better.
I know, but I did.
Because cannabis could be, it's the plant and it's marijuana is sort of one of the products of cannabis. So I would use cannabis. Okay? The Act refers to cannabis and defines it better, so. Now, I still think you need the first clause in there. Okay, because you want to know if there's any illegal substances at all. But I think you also want to know what's happened since October 17th. Are people growing their legal limit or not growing it? I think you just want to know. Okay? So why would it be important to know if someone's growing legal cannabis in the place? Anybody? Well, the whole issue with the growth of cannabis, legally or illegally, has been what effect it has on the house, the physical effect it has on the house. Because to grow cannabis, you need a lot of electricity to do it, but you need it to be very humid and very dark. So dark and humid leads to mold. So the whole issue is mold. Okay? So you want to know if it was used as a grow-op or just used for a lot of growth of illegal marijuana over the years, there's potential for mold in the place. Okay, and mold can be devastating. It might be a little bit, you get it cleaned up. It might be you got to tear the whole place down, like it was a real grow-up. So that's really the whole issue you're trying to find out. Which is why I think when we talk about these at these seminars, I think we make the point that even after October 17th, you'd want to know if they're growing cannabis. Because they're allowed to do it, it's legal. We don't know how they're growing it. We don't know if they're growing it properly. We don't know if they're following the instructions they get. We don't know if they're just doing it in their bathroom and cranking up the humidity level, and that there's humidity all through the house. So we don't know what they're doing. And I think eventually there might be not only instructions, but I think it would make sense for the government to come out with some sort of aquarium type of container. You can grow your 4 plants. I don't know why they didn't pass it this way, but you have to grow it within a contained unit, so it doesn't affect the house. But there isn't a law like that right now. There's no regulation like that. So it just says you can grow your 4 plants. You can buy them from the government. You can grow with your seeds. You can grow your plants. So if they know what they're doing, there may not be an issue. If they don't, I think you'd want to know, your clients might want to know if they're buying a house, whether or not there's been any cannabis growth. And if they say yes, but here it is, it's very contained, it's just over here, and you can tell, well, we're not worried about a potential mold problem or not. Okay? But that's the whole issue. So I thought it'd be useful when we do these seminars for you to let's talk about why it's important. Okay? And you know the difference between a stigma and a defect. I'm going to tell you anyways. So a stigma is a non-physical attribute which can cause a negative emotional response to a potential buyer. And these are some examples of what a stigma might be. Okay, so it's a non-physical attribute, but it causes something in your head saying, I got a problem with this. Okay? It's not mold that I visibly see on the wall, but it could be this house was previously used by someone who's known to have been in organized crime, or the property was used in the commission of a crime, or people might think a house was haunted, and that's what their true belief is, or they know there was a murder at the house or a suicide at the house.
What's a chop shop?
Where they usually it's for chopping up cars, not people. It's a good question, but it's usually places where they bring in, they steal a car, you bring it in, they take it all apart and they sell it, or other products too, where they computers, they take it apart and they sell it. Television, steal it, and instead of selling the whole thing, they're selling it for parts. I don't know if they're doing transplants with human parts as well. Okay? And one of the things on the list is a former grow-up. Okay? So, this is something important for you to know as a real estate agent. There's no law in Ontario that says that a seller or his representative, which is you guys, a seller or representative has to disclose a stigma to a buyer. Okay? But do you disclose a stigma to a buyer? Okay, do you know why you do that? Okay, there's no law that says you have to do that. A seller clearly doesn't. Seller's lawyer, I don't have to tell anybody about it. But you do as a real estate agent. And it's RICO that makes you do it. Okay, so under RICO you actually have to disclose a stigma. Okay? Now what's a stigma to one person isn't always a stigma to another person. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories to give you a better example of what a stigma is. So 6 years ago, my wife and I decided to move. We were in the same house for 25 years. Our kids are now grown, they're out of the house. And we decided to move. We lived in Thornhill for 25 years. We decided I wanted to stay near the 407. We ended up moving a mile north in Richmond, like directly a mile from where we were. But while we're in the process of looking for a place, my son, same age as Sam, 33-year-old, is our real estate agent. And so he's the one booking appointments and showing us around. So he's not going to be moving in with us. My other son's not moving in, but my daughter was away from university for 4 years. She's coming back to Toronto. She's going to do a master's at U of T. She was going to come live with us for about a year until she figured out what she was going to do. So she's coming with us now to go look at this house in Richmond Hill. So we're going in the evening, and we get to the door, and the seller's agent greets us there and says, "Gotta tell you, the family's home, and I'm really sorry, and I was going to call you and get a chance to think, but we didn't want to cancel the appointment. It's a great house. We want you to come see it, but they're just going to be staying up in one bedroom, and no problem for you to come in. And the reason is the owner's elderly mother is up there, and she's really sick, and we couldn't get her out of the house. So, so my son gets very embarrassed. He's taking his mom and dad, to, and the agent, is supposed to be an empty house, and he's, no, let's book the appointment. We go, no, we're here already. Let's go in and we'll go tour around the house. We don't have to look at that bed. And we look around the house, nice house and everything. Then we're upstairs with the master bedroom, with the other bedroom, and there's one bedroom, the door's closed, and they're saying, "Oh, you have to come and look at this bedroom too." And we're like, "Well, that's okay. We decided the bedroom. We don't want to interfere." No, we really want you to come. It's a beautiful bedroom. You got to come in and look at it, and it's no problem. And they insist. So they open the door, and we look inside, and the elderly lady, who's in her 90s for sure, is in a hospital bed with oxygen on and hooked up to intravenous and a heart monitor, and her son is on one knee at the edge of the bed praying like this, and she looks like she's on her last couple breaths. And we're saying, it's okay, we don't have to see it. No, look at how beautiful the drapes are. we just want to get out of the room. And then we shut the door, so we go down the hall, and I got my daughter Lindsay's beside me, and we leave and walk out, and I go, "Lindsay?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "That's your room." So true story. So no matter how much we liked that house, there was no chance that we're moving into that house. There's no chance my daughter's going to go in there. If we bought that house, we would never go into that one bedroom. So we weren't going to buy that house. Like, there's just no chance. Now, eventually, that lady probably passed away, and maybe the buyers never saw it, and to them there'd be no stigma to the house. There wouldn't be a stigma if they knew that there was an elderly lady there and she got sick, and maybe she went to the hospital, maybe she died in the hospital. That's not a stigma. But to us, the way we saw it, that's a stigma. Okay? So that's a good example. I'll give you another example. I had a client years ago. She was selling her house, and it turns out that her husband had committed suicide in the garage about 5 or 6 years before we put it up for sale. And very tragic situation. I knew him too, and he just had difficulties, and he finally took his own life in the garage. And she puts it up for sale, and we get a closing, firm deal. We're moving toward the closing, and somehow word got to the buyers that there was this suicide in the garage. And there was nothing physical about it, like he would never know it. But anyway, they knew that there was this suicide in the house, and they wanted out of the deal.
How did they know?
Okay. I think a neighbor told them, or someone said something. Okay. Anyways, back and forth, the right to get out, not the right to get out, and there was no chance that they were going to close the transaction, which would mean that our client would end up in a lawsuit that she might win or she might not win, depending on how they found out, when they found out. Go through this, do they have a duty to disclose, who knew what, when. Anyways, none of that's really important to her when I'm sitting down and talking to her. She just wants to sell her house. So she's not selling to them, doesn't want a lawsuit. She wants to sell the house to the next people. So how's she going to sell it? Okay? So the biggest problem was, I said, look, you're the seller. When you're selling it, you don't have to disclose the suicide. I'm the lawyer, I don't have to disclose the suicide. When I'm dealing with the buyer's lawyer, I don't have to talk to him and ever mention it to him. But your agent does. Your agent has knowledge. Your agent knows about it. So if this deal falls apart, your agent can go sell it to the next person. Your agent knows about the suicide now. That agent has to disclose it to the next buyer. well, then no one's gonna buy my house, or they're gonna knock the price down. I said, well, the solution, unfortunately for the agent, is to get another agent. So we had to talk to him about releasing himself from the, he would say, either you're gonna release my client from it, or we just have to wait you out and then put the house back on the market once the hold period and everything is expired, and then do it. So anyways, he was gracious enough to, he understood the situation, and he backed out of it, and then it was relisted with another agent who was not told about this, and ended up selling. It sold for a little bit less, but not because of that, just market change, because it was like 3 or 4 months later. So it sold for a little bit less, but it sold, okay? And that's the way you have to deal with it as an agent, because you do have that obligation, okay? So, stigma is a little different from a defect. Okay, there's 2 types of defects, a latent defect and a patent defect. So we'll just give you a little information on those. So a patent defect is something that can be seen or identified easily at a home inspection. You don't have to be an expert to figure it out. I could see it as just a dumb lawyer. You could see it as a real estate agent. The buyers, going in, could see something. There's damage, there's something obvious. They might see mold on the walls, in the shower stall, or something on the tiles or something. So it might be obvious, okay? So it's something that's physical and can be seen. Let me just catch up here. And this is where we get into, how does this affect the cannabis? And it's all this issue of humidity and the effect that the mold does on the walls, okay, which we've already talked about. So a latent defect is a little bit different. A latent defect is something physical, but it's not something that's apparent. It's not something that you can see normally when you walk in, okay? So examples could be structural problems. Examples could be mold that's not visible to the naked eye, that's hidden somewhere else, okay? Now, people are allowed to live in their homes. Things happen. Damage occurs, okay? It might be a mold problem. It could be a fire. It could be a flood. Okay, people have fires and floods in their homes all the time. People have small mold problems in their house all the time, whether it be without becoming a grow-up, okay? You're allowed to live in your home. You're allowed to fix the problems that are there. You don't have to disclose everything that you've fixed up. Okay, if you had a fire in your house 10 years ago, and you had a professional company come in and they cleaned it all out and they rebuilt it all and everything is fine and there's been no issues, you don't have to tell anybody you had a fire 10 years ago. As a seller, you don't have to tell them as a seller's agent if you, that's not something you would have to disclose, because it's not relevant. Okay, the house is fine. Okay, if you had a mold issue and it was professionally cleaned out, and the home was remediated, then it's not something you have to disclose, okay? But if you're something that you're hiding, that you know is there, and it wasn't fixed properly, or it wasn't done thoroughly, or you're not sure if it was done because not enough time has passed to know if it was done well, and you don't, then you might have an issue, because then it's a non-disclosure issue, okay? So that's a problem, and people do that too. Just about to sell, just like you're staging the homes. Like everybody's doing that these days. And you're also, oh, we need a new coat of paint, we gotta fix this, and that's the time everybody fixes up their house. I was thinking, why fix up then? Why don't you fix up while you live in it and enjoy the house instead of only fixing it up when you leave? But you're fixing it up, but it depends how you fix it up. If you have mold in the shower stall, and you know it's there, and you pull off tiles and you see there's all kinds of mold underneath in the drywall and everything, and you don't get rid of all that, and you just put new tiles and cover it up, okay, there's a mold problem, okay, and that's a latent defect. Because now you go to sell it, even if the transaction closes, and it doesn't matter how far after the closing, the new owner discovers that there was this mold in the wall, and it's obvious when you bring an expert in that the mold's existed for a long time, and the buyers had to know about it because they did all this work around it. And for sure it's been there because they know how long it's been there. So if the professional evidence would be that it's been there and the sellers knew about it and just covered it up, the seller's still responsible for it. The seller's still liable for that. So that's a latent defect. Same thing applies if it was a flood, a fire, the mold issue. If there's something that was just covered up and not really fixed properly. Okay? So just putting some new drywall And a new rug down where there was a flood at one point in time doesn't necessarily solve the problem. You know, the question is, you know, was it dried out properly? Was any mold removed from it properly? Was it cleaned out properly? Was it certified? Did you have a licensed person come in and do that? You have evidence of it. If you did, you don't want to have a problem, and if a lot of time has passed, it's not something you would have to disclose. Okay? So now, what you all came to really hear about. Where can you buy cannabis? Well, right now, the only place to buy it legally is through the government's website. This is the provincial government's website. Okay? It's been a disaster so far. It's supposed to be available as of October 17th, but it's been a bit of a disaster because they're way behind in the ordering. And it's not a big issue for people that just want recreational stuff, but it's become a big issue for people that were counting on it for medicinal purposes, that were stopped using their script, or were holding off getting a script, or just want it, but the government's been really slow at getting it out. So, but that's the only place to get it right now is through a website. The plan is that there will be retail locations available. The target date that you should know about is April 1st, 2019. That's when the provincial government was supposed to have these retail operations up and running. Okay? Now we're already at December 3rd, and we haven't even received the regulations about what these retail stores are going to look like or how they're going to comply. So no one's building any retail locations yet. So they're a little behind on this too. So there might be some up and running by then. They're saying, we're being told that in December this month, that's when these regulations are supposed to be available. And that's when that side of the industry is going to get moving, to get these retail establishments going. There's a lot of issues with going to retail cannabis products. Okay? We don't know what the physical stores are going to look like yet. Is it going to be you walk in and you're in just a counter and you're buying everything through a catalog of some sort, or you're walking through shelves of things and pulling things off the shelves? I think it's going to be a little bit of both. But it's got to be very well regulated. You've got to regulate what the stores are going to look like, what the security is going to be like, you know, what temperature things have to be stored at, things like that. Who's allowed to be, you know, who are the operators of the retail stores, who's allowed to work in the retail stores. It's got to be controlled, you know, the same way that they control LCBOs right now. You know, alcohol is a safe product if it's used properly, right? So if it's sold properly and distributed properly and bottled properly and made properly and retail properly, it lessens the problems. But we don't know what the rules are yet. The government hasn't come out with them yet. So now that you've got your cannabis, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to, where are you going to smoke it? Where are you going to go to vape it? And don't forget, you're going to have all this material too. But just to give you an idea of where you can smoke it and where you can't. So we've just got some information here for you. But the general rule is the cigarette rule. It's generally wherever you can smoke a cigarette legally, you can smoke cannabis for the most part. Like smoking is smoking. That's the way they're trying to deal with it. So you can certainly do it in the privacy of your own home. You can do it outside in certain areas. Where you have to be careful of is where you can't do it. And that's as a general rule, we have some specifics in here, but as a general rule, anywhere near where kids are going to be. Okay, you can be outside in certain places, but as soon as you get close to a playground, you can't be smoking it. So you can't be at the park with the kids, you know, on the playground, and you're sitting on the bench, and you're smoking your cannabis. You can't do that. Okay. You got to be away from schools. You got to be away from hospitals. You got to be away from other public places. You can't smoke in patios of restaurants, okay? Because you can't smoke cigarettes out there either. They have to have a designated smoking area or something to do that. But you can't on a patio on a nice summer day. There's patios all over the place. You can sit out there and have your alcoholic beverage, but you can't smoke your cannabis out there.
What about more entrance?
Sorry?
More entrance.
Now you've got to be away from it. I don't. It's anything that's considered a common area. Yeah, you got to be at least 9 meters away from those entrances, so they're going to push you out. Which I think is supposed to be out there smoking as well. I think you're supposed to be that far out.
So is it
The same as the smoking, like where you can be smoking and you can smoke cannabis?
That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, that's the
entrance.
that's the provincial legislation too. The municipalities are gonna get involved in this as well. And they can control some of that as well. So it might be different in Markham and different in Richmond Hill and different in Toronto, how they're gonna implement all this. Okay, but right now the general rules, if you can smoke a cigarette somewhere, you can generally smoke that. You know, one exception I know of, you're allowed to smoke a cigarette if you're driving a car, but you clearly cannot smoke a marijuana cigarette while you're driving a car.
Smoking is not allowed indoor.
Sorry?
Smoking is not allowed indoor.
It is allowed indoors in the privacy of your own home.
Not allowed.
It is allowed. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Private home.
yeah. We should put that up here. There's a place you can, you know, private homes, sidewalks, designated guest rooms in a hotel, controlled area, long-term care and home facilities, retirement home. That's places that you can.
But if your private home have kid, can you still smoke?
Yes. And you can smoke cigarettes in front of them as well, and blow right into your face if you want. Because there's no law about being, there's no law against being a bad parent. So the answer is yes. Okay. Now, there is a Smoke-Free Ontario Act that restricts things as well. So you can't smoke tobacco, so therefore you can't smoke cannabis in any enclosed public space, and enclosed workplace or any school. Anything near any public schools, any indoor common areas in a condominium or apartment building. If it's a common area, you can't. In the dwelling unit in the condo, you can, unless there's specific smoking rules that prevent that. Okay, and we'll talk a little more about that as well. And the same thing applies whether it's, you know, if you're in a condo, whether you own it or if you're a tenant. Okay, the list goes on. Anyway, like a lot of it is childcare facilities, reserved seating in a sports arena. You can't go to a Blue Jays game even if the roof is open and be in your seat and smoking marijuana. Okay, you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes in your seat either at a Blue Jay game. You're allowed to go get 12 beers and drink yourself silly at your seat, but you can't smoke cannabis during a Blue Jays game. Okay? And again, a lot of it is, I don't want to read through all of these things, but it's, when kids are around, it's not good. Publicly owned sports field, but not including golf courses, so presumably you're going to be allowed to when you're out on a golf course. You may not be allowed to drive the golf cart if you're smoking cannabis, okay, because you're operating a vehicle then, but that's going to depend on whether or not, how much you've had as well. This is an important point I want you to see. Vehicles and boats. A person cannot consume cannabis, whether you're smoking, vaping, or eating it, in a vehicle or a boat that is being driven. So that's pretty clear. Or is at risk of being put into motion. Okay, so we all know what driving a boat or a car is. But the law is also, or it's at risk of being put into motion. Okay, and that's a pretty loose term. And I'm not sure what exactly what that means. The only example I can think of, and it's more for a boat than a car, but if a boat is parked at a dock and there's people out in the dock and they're smoking cannabis and they go into the boat and they're using it as a lounge, or just a place to sit down, that's not a problem. You're allowed to do that, okay? If the police officer comes by to check on you and the keys to the boat are in the ignition, you might have a problem, because he might interpret that you're about to drive off in the boat. It's at risk of being put into motion. Okay, if he comes by and the keys are up at the cottage and it's not in the boat, then I think it'd be clearly, you know, he would say, okay, there's no, it's not at risk of being put into motion. Okay, and the same thing would presumably apply for a car. You know, if it's a cold night and you go out in the driveway and you decide to go into your car to smoke marijuana, and, but, you know, an officer comes by, but you don't have the keys on you, it's not at risk of being put into motion. At least an argument can be made for that.
How
So-
about there's a small limit you can consume, like alcohol?
Oh, you
Drive a
can
car.
consume it, you just can't be impaired by it.
And,
if you're driving.
But they said a person cannot consume.
No, that's, you can't even do it. And obviously, you know, in a car, just like the alcohol rule, I always look at the alcohol rule.
So there's a
You
limit.
can't have, obviously, a driver of a car cannot be drinking alcohol when they're driving. But the people in the back seat can't be drinking alcohol either. You cannot have open alcoholic beverages in a motor vehicle. Okay? The same thing applies to a boat. Doesn't matter if the driver's driving and he's not drinking, the people in the back of the boat can't be drinking a beer while the boat's in operation.
So there's no limit allowed in the car's in motion.
When it's in motion, it's
There's
zero.
no limit allowed.
Okay?
I thought there
Now,
was.
you can have alcohol in the trunk of the car, while it's in
Yeah.
motion, it's closed up, and no one in the car has access to. You can have alcohol on the boat, okay, that's not being consumed, because it's in a cooler or something like that. But no one can be sitting there with a can of beer in their hand while the boat's being operated. Okay, so some of it's sort of common sense, is you gotta think of the alcohol rules that apply as well. Okay? So, let's talk about the driving. If a police officer finds that you're impaired, and that's the whole key here, if you're impaired by any drug, whether it's alcohol, cannabis, anything else, you're subject to these types of penalties. It could be license suspension, financial penalties, the vehicle can be taken away from you, criminal record, jail time. It doesn't matter. He said, well, I have my 30 grams of cannabis with me, and I smoked some of it, and I'm allowed to do that, and I even grew it in my own house, because I'm allowed to do that, it's all legal. It doesn't matter, if you're impaired, and you're operating a boat or a motor vehicle, if you're impaired, you're impaired. Okay, and you're subject to any of these fines or penalties. So that's what the police officers are gonna try and figure out. Now, the testing is a bit of an issue right now, because it's a developing industry. The same way that when, at one point in time, there wasn't good ways to test people if they were impaired from alcohol. And then they had certain breathalyzers, and they had the next generation and the next generation, and now they're pretty good with it. Okay? And there was also kinds of problems with those breathalyzers originally when they came in, because not only do the breathalyzers have to be accurate, they have to be used properly, they have to be serviced properly, they have to be tested properly, and the police officers that are administering have to be trained properly in how to use them. And all those things were challenges to people that were found to be impaired, it blew over the limits in alcohol. So we're gonna go through a bit of the same process, I imagine, with cannabis. Okay, they've got some ability to do these testing now, but eventually it's gonna get better and better and better. Okay, so I wouldn't take my chances just because you're not sure if they're gonna catch you or not, okay? They're gonna get more sophisticated with these things, and it's not worth it for these penalties. Now, so if you are, let's go back to the legal limit. Legal limit in Ontario is 19, okay? But you are not allowed to have any cannabis in your system, okay? If you are driving a motor vehicle and you're 21 or under, or if you have a G1, G2, M1, or M2 license. You can't have any in your system, okay? Now, in your body, now, your body gets rid of it at a different rate than alcohol. Alcohol you can clear out of your system faster than cannabis. You can have traces of cannabis in your system 30 days after you smoke a joint. It depends on your body type, it depends on how much you had and things like that. So this is going to be interesting to see how they're going to deal with the youth of today. Because first of all, so if you're driving a motor vehicle and you're 19, you're allowed to. So you're allowed to smoke it at 19, you're allowed to grow it, you're allowed to walk around with it. But if you want to drive a car, you get caught, and you got it in your system, you're going to lose your license. Okay? And it's the same thing with alcohol. The rules on alcohol, you can't have it in your system if you're going to be operating a motor vehicle. Okay? So they've got to be careful with that. Now, some of the cannabis use is medicinal, as we've talked about. Police officers could be satisfied that you're allowed to use it for medical purposes. You have a script, and that's the same thing that applied before October 17th. But the real question is if you're impaired. If you're impaired, if a police officer finds you and you're impaired, they don't care whether you need it for medicinal purposes or you did it for recreational purposes. It doesn't matter. Okay? You can't be impaired. So if you need it for medicinal purposes, you need a lot of it, and that would make you impaired if you're operating. Don't operate a motor vehicle. You take an Uber, you get a Lyft, you take public transportation. Okay? So it doesn't give you, just because it's legal doesn't mean you can do it wherever you want. Okay? Now, if you're driving across Canada, you can take your 30 grams with you. Family of 5 driving to Vancouver, that's 150 grams.
Each person?
No. Each one's allowed 30 grams. So you gotta be careful about how you do that too. Okay, if you all pool your, mom and dad say, hey, you know what, kids, give us your cannabis, we'll put it all over here. And you put it all together, you got 150 grams, and you get pulled over for a speeding ticket, and they find 150 grams all together, you got a big problem. Okay, that's a criminal offense. Each person's allowed to have 30 grams on them. So, yeah, so everybody should just keep it on their own. Or you have it in 5 different suitcases, but don't pool it. Oh, sorry, what am I pressing on this? Sorry, thank you.
You get so excited.
Whoa. We'll get up there. So anyways, you gotta be careful how you're doing it. Don't pool it, keep it separate. Just see, the youth of today, Mom, Dad, mind if I hold your 30 grams? Or maybe it'll be the other way. Maybe it'll be the mom and dad going to the kids, say, hey, you're 19 now, aren't you? We'll get me 30 grams of cannabis. I'm running low. So, but it's allowed. Sorry, let me just catch up here. Now, that's driving across Canada. What if you're flying? Flying to Vancouver. Okay? Same thing applies. You can take your 30 grams with you. Okay? You can walk through the airport, you go check in, you got luggage, you got golf clubs, and here's my 30 grams. There it is. I got it with me. I'm going on an airplane with my cannabis, but you can do that. Okay? You're allowed to do that. Now, as long as you're staying within Canada. Okay? But if you're going to cross the border to the U.S., you got a big problem. Okay? Very different. You cannot take it with you across the border to go to any other country, let alone the U.S. Okay? Now the U.S. Before I get to this, let me just tell you about the U.S. The U.S. is being really tough on us right now about this, and this is just an article a couple days ago. American officials can't say yet for sure if there's been any change in the number of people being turned away at the Canadian-U.S. border for using marijuana or working or investing in the legal cannabis industry. U.S. border authorities say anyone who admits to having used marijuana prior to October 17th, the day it became illegal, could be barred from the country, as well as investors and industry employees who try to cross for cannabis-related reasons. Okay? Customs and Border Protection initially warned that any Canadian who gave a whiff of pot involved from either using the drug to working or investing in the industry risked being banned or denied entry. Okay? So that's really strict. And they're not talking about just denying you entry. They're talking about they have discretion to ban.
Forever.
Yeah, so ban means you're never going.
So you don't tell the truth.
Well, that's a very good point. So what do you do? Because if they're asking you questions, that's going to happen all the time at the border right now. Whether you're driving or flying or whatever, they're going to go to the border. Oh, you're from Canada. I hear cannabis is legal there now. How are you enjoying that? Are you growing your 4 plants at home? We understand that's legal. And as soon as you start answering yes to any of this, you could be either denied entry or banned from entry.
Yeah.
So you really got to be careful with this. And it goes beyond that. If you're in the industry of growing, producing, cultivating cannabis, retailing it, what do you do for a living? Oh, I just opened a new retail cannabis store. That's really nice. You're not coming into the US. Okay? And they're even going one step further to that. Okay? No, if you're investing, do you smoke cannabis? No, never did in my whole life. Are you growing it at home? You're allowed to grow 4 plants. Do you grow it? Nope, don't grow it. You're not possessing it, you're not caring for it? Nope, never have it. That's great. You're not in the industry, are you retailing it, you're growing it, you're manufacturing? Nope. But I invested in some really good stock in cannabis. It's a huge industry, and I've got a big shareholder. I've made a ton of money in it. That's really nice. You're not coming into the U.S.
How about just trading some stocks?
No, that's an investor, stock holder in a cannabis company. Now that's the strict interpretation of their laws and rules right now. Okay, I think all of that's going to soften a bit. Okay, now in the U.S. there's, I don't know if it's 9 or 10 or 12, it's something like that, states that it's legal as well. Okay, the whole reason for all this and the reason of being strict right now, it's all because of Trump. Okay, and I'm not making political statements right now about this, but a lot of this has to do with the free trade agreement, with NAFTA, and there were some tough negotiations. Trump didn't like NAFTA. He wanted to renegotiate with Canada and Mexico. Canada was being tough on him. Trudeau got him really upset at a G7 conference, so he's not a big fan of Trudeau's right now. And he just decided, like, screw you, Canada. You've got this new law coming in. We're going to make it tough on you. We know how important it is for Canadians to go to the U.S., for travel, for holidays and everything else. We're going to make it hard on you. Okay? So a lot of it is their instructions right now for them to take strict interpretations of this. Now this was announced to be worse than it's now becoming in practice, because since that initial hardline position that Trump was taking, now they have a new deal like with Mexico and Canada. So now he's softened it up a little bit. So I think you're going to see that it's going to relax a little bit. But I think it goes back to your point now, like, what do you do when you get to the border? Like, are you going to admit to what you're doing, even though you're legally allowed to do it? Okay. Now, as a lawyer, I can't advise you to lie to anybody. I certainly can't advise you to swear a document. They're not asking you to swear a document under oath. Okay. They're just asking you questions, and it depends what they have with the questions. So I sort of look at it the same way if you're stopped at a ride program. Okay. Now, if you've had 1 drink, and there's no chance that you blow over the limit, but you happen to get pulled over to a ride program, you got 2 options. One is when they ask you, have you had anything to drink tonight? And you say,
no.
Yes, I had 1 drink 3 hours ago, with my friends, and that's all I had. That's enough cause for the police officer to say, pull over, I'm going to test you. I'm not sure, I want to check. So that's going to cost you an hour. But now, if you blow, you're probably not going to blow over the limit if you really only had the 1 drink. So you're going to eventually, no harm, no foul, they're going to let you go. But you just lost an hour of your life because you're honest. Okay? Now if you say no, and the officer, he can say, great, have a nice day, a nice evening, and a lot of times that's what would happen. Or, at the same time, he's leaning in, he's checking your breath, he's looking at your eyes, see if they're bloodshot, he's looking for other signs of it. So if he believes you, he's going to let you go. If he doesn't, he might pull you over anyways. But if you lied, you did have a drink, but you lied about it, there's no, and then he decides to check you, and he says, I can smell the alcohol on it, or I test you, you don't blow over the limit, there's alcohol. He can't give you a ticket for lying. You didn't blow over the limit. So it's not illegal to lie. But you didn't hear it from me. So the same thing sort of applies with cannabis. You got to think about it and how you want to deal with it at the border. Okay. Because if you get on one of these lists with potential to be banned from a country, it's really hard to get your name cleared up. Okay. You get on even if it's not banned, and you're just turned away. You think, okay, I'm turned away. I'm going to come back. Tomorrow and go through. You're already on a list, and you're gonna be pulled over, and you're gonna be questioned. And to get off those lists are really difficult. Okay, So anyways, it's just some practical advice that you didn't get from me. All right, let's just talk a little bit about the commercial side of things. Commercial cultivation, okay? We've been getting inquiries in the last number of months or year or more about people that are interested in commercial cultivation, growing it or something like that. And all of a sudden, like, a lot of people are interested in buying farms all of a sudden. And they're not always telling us exactly why they want to buy a farm. I'm looking at buying this farm. Oh, are you a farmer? Are you in the farm business? No. But we just thought it'd be nice to buy this farm. What are they growing on the farm? Oh, potatoes and corn. Oh, so you're gonna grow potatoes and corn and be a change of lifestyle, and you're gonna be a potato and corn farmer now. Well, I don't know. We'll see. But we're interested in buying this piece of land that's a farm. Well, okay, you don't have to tell us what you really want to do. We're only your lawyers, and we can't tell anybody. There's no reason why they can't tell us, but just people, because it's cannabis, sometimes they're not sure they should disclose things. But the reality is that it's not so easy. You can't just buy a piece of land that's zoned for farming that used to grow corn and said, okay, now I'm going to grow marijuana. Just because you own a farm doesn't mean you can grow marijuana. It doesn't work like that, okay? It's a very complicated, regulated industry on many different levels. So I want to just give you a little bit of information of that. And by the way, at our firm, like, we're real estate lawyers. We're not cannabis law experts, okay? So whatever I'm telling you today is everything that I possibly know about it. And you'll know as much as I do by this session. But I know enough to know that if you want to go into the industry, you've got to get the proper professional advice. And it's becoming a huge industry. Like, once upon a time, there was no such thing as environmental law. When I went to law school, there was no classes on environmental law. There was no lawyers going, oh, I want to go into environmental law. Nobody knew what it was until we started having problems with the environment. And now you don't buy a commercial property without checking the environmental status of it. You get a phase 1 or a phase 2, and you go through all these tests. So it became a huge industry. And there's major